All right, Shabbos, say good morning. Let us begin. We are going to start to Mirza Hashem. Today's daf is Yud Beis. Let us begin by our verses for the month of Teves, Yoel Sara Kelman, for dedicating all the Shurim and Drashos this month in honor of the birth of their daughter Oriya Tahel, and in the hope that all of the couples davening for children will have their tefilos answered bekarov. To thank Stephen Teri Czinn for dedicating all the Shurim and Drashos this month in honor of their grandchildren Adin, Tzvi, and Naftali Moshe, and to thank Shirley Elbaum Family for dedicating the Shurim this month in memory of Gerald Elbaum, Yaakov Kopel, Ben R Avraham Menachem. We hope that in the merit of our TALMUD Torah, the neshama will have an aliyah and the family a nechama. We thank our Daf Yomi sponsors for today, the Plunka family, for dedicating the shir in creation of the yahrzeit of the Rambam, Moshe ben Maimon Zecher Tzadik v'Kadosh Livracha. We hope that in the merit of our TALMUD Torah, the Rambam's neshama will have an aliyah. Incredible. Okay, so with that, let us begin. We have a beautiful, beautiful daf ahead of us today, a very special daf. Today's daf is, as I mentioned, Yud Beis. We are picking up on the bottom of Yud Aleph Amud Beis, the bottom of 11b. And we are picking up, let's actually begin Amar. So it's 2, 4, 6, 8 lines up from the bottom. So remember again, yesterday, we were focusing on the fascinating Gemara regarding the original mistake of Belshazzar with the calculation of the 70 years of diaspora, thinking that the 70 years had concluded, the Jews had not been redeemed, and Belshazzar celebrating essentially what he thought was the demise of the Jewish people by using the kelim, the utensils of the Beis HaMikdash. Achashverosh understood the mistake of Belshazzar's calculation and was determined not to repeat that mistake. Amar, Ihu mitatoi, Belshazzar made a mistake. Ana chashivna velo ta'ina. I will make the calculations and will not make the mistake. After all, again, says Achashverosh, what was Belshazzar's mistake? Miksiv lemalchus Bavel. Does it say that the 70 years are counted from the monarchy of Bavel? Rather, again, the 70 years are not counted from the ascension of Nebuchadnezzar to the throne. Remember again, that's when Belshazzar began his calculations of the 70 years from the time that Nebuchadnezzar ascended the throne. It says, Achashverosh, that's not what it says. Lib Bavel ksiv. What is Lib Bavel? My Lib Bavel? Legalus Bavel. Rather, Achashverosh said the clock starts from the beginning of Babylonian diaspora. Kama b'tzirin. Ultimately, again, how many years was Belshazzar off? Timni, ultimately 8 years. Timni, so chashiv v'ayil chilufayu. So therefore, Achashverosh understood that in fact, Belshazzar had celebrated 8 years prematurely. Therefore, what did he do? So chashiv v'ayil chilufayu. So he added another 8 years. Chada de Belshazzar, another year of Belshazzar's reign. Chamish de Daryavesh the Koresh, 5 years combined of the reigns of Daryavesh and Koresh, Vitarti Didei, and 2 years of Achashverosh's reign himself. Shivin. That gave Achashverosh the total count, or a total tally of 70 years. Kevan dechazi demalu, Shivin velo ifrak. Once he went ahead and he saw that the 70 years had elapsed and Klal Yisrael had not been redeemed, Amar hashta vadai su lo mifriki. Then Achashverosh said, oh, you see from here, the Jewish people are not going to be redeemed. 70 years have gone by. He fought, so therefore, what did he do? Same thing as Belshazzar. Apik manei de be'mikdasha vishtamish behu. He took out the utensils of the Beis HaMikdash and he celebrated. So Achashverosh celebrated in the same way of his predecessor, of Belshazzar, celebrating the demise of the Jewish people by making a grand feast with the utensils of the Beis HaMikdash. So we'll say, so again, just to understand what's the feast that the Gemara is referring to, this is the celebration of in the beginning of the Megillah. Achashverosh's grand party served a variety of different purposes. One of them was to celebrate what he perceived was the demise of the Jewish people, the elapsing of the 70 years. Jewish people have still not been redeemed. That's why, interestingly enough, in the Megillah, there's a minhag. When you read the phrase, Mikalim, Mikalim Shonim, when speaking about the utensils used in the party, literally again it says Kalim means utensils, Mikalim Shonim, unique utensils. Some have the custom to read that phrase in the tune of Megillah's Eicha. V'kelim, Mikalim Shonim, in the middle of the Megillah. Why? Reference to this Gemara that the utensils used in the party of Achashverosh were none other than the utensils of the Beis HaMikdash. But of course, we're going to see Achashverosh was wrong in his calculations as well. Bas Satan v'riked beinehem. Achashverosh was wrong. Literally, again, the Satan danced at that party. V'harages Vashti. So it's interesting. The Gemara attributes the death of Vashti to the mistaken calculations of Achashverosh. Something bad always happens when you celebrate the demise of the Jewish people, right? So Belshazzar died, right? Achashverosh killed his wife. The Gemara says, 1 second. But the truth is, it sounds like Achashverosh's calculations were correct. What's the problem? To which the Gemara says, Ihu nami mitatoi di ibayle lemimne mecharvos Yerushalayim. Oh, says the Gemara something very interesting. In fact, if you remember again, going back to the beginning of yesterday's daf, or I should say the beginning of Amud Beis of yesterday's daf, the Gemara pointed out something very interesting. The Psukim quote two different ways in which the Navi counts the 70 years. One says Lamalchus Bavel, and one says Lecharvos Yerushalayim. In fact, interestingly enough, when does the count of the 70 years begin? From the time that Yerushalayim was destroyed. So once again, Achashverosh began counting a little bit early. He started counting it from the beginning of Babylonian exile, but interestingly enough, Babylonian exile actually preceded the destruction of Yerushalayim. How many years off was Achashverosh? Sof Kama B'tzirin, so Chadesar. He was 11 years off. 11 years off. Ihu kama malach. So I must say, by the way, you can see this, and now the calculation actually works out. Ihu kama malach arbeisar. Achashverosh himself ruled 14 years. Bar beisar didei ibayle lemivne beis hamikdash. So if that's the case, then in reality, if he was off 11 years, then halacha lemaisa in the 14th year of his reign, technically, construction of the Beis HaMikdash should have started. But in fact, remember again, as we mentioned yesterday, construction it's not really started, it's restarted, right? Because it was paused by Achashverosh. It doesn't really restart until the days of his son, Daryavesh. So what's going on? Alama ksiv, ba'adin batelis abidas beis elokadi b'Yerushalayim. Amarava. So Rabbi says, if that's the case, in reality, Achashverosh was off by 11 years, then the truth is construction of the Beis HaMikdash should have started at the end of Achashverosh's reign. But it doesn't start until the reign of his son. To which the Gemara says, you're right, Amarava shanim mikutaos habu. Both say literally translated. If you look at Rashi, actually look at the last Rashi, shanim mikutaos, which literally means they were cut off years or truncated years. Rashi says, Osan shanim shemaninon lemala yesh bahen shenivlu mishal acharon. Both say some of the years that were reckoned kind of were overlapping years. And therefore, again, even the years counted up until the reign of Achashverosh were not complete. Therefore, top of Yud Beis, Tanya Namihachi, a brayso that supports this assertion as well. Va'od shana acheres leBavel, va'amad Daryavesh v'hishlima. So I will say, interestingly enough, it seems to be that some of this happened in counting of the reigns of the kings. There were some overlapping years. So therefore, it turns out that the 70 years don't really end until the reign of Daryavesh, right? This is the second Daryavesh, the son of Achashverosh and Esther, Ve'eshlima. That's when the 70 years end. And in fact, again, when you do the math, by the time the 70 years end, that in fact is when Daryavesh had ordered for the continue of the construction of the Beis HaMikdash. Incredible. Amar Rava says, by the way, if this sounds complicated, it is. Af Daniel Ta. Even the Navi Daniel made a mistake about how to calculate the 70 years. The Gemara says, Af Daniel Ta b'hai chushbana. Even Daniel made a mistake with this calculation. D'chsiv, b'shnas achas l'malko, ani Daniel binosi b'svarim. So listen to this. He says, in the first year of his reign, right, I, Daniel, of Daryavesh, I, Daniel, literally binosi b'svarim. I contemplated, or I thought about, I tried to analyze the calculations. Mitikamer binosi, the fact that Daniel says, I went back and I thought about the calculations, michlal deta'a, makes it sound like Daniel himself had originally made a mistake regarding the calculations. So we'll say, so by the way, you have to understand something. By design, the Malvin points this out, by design, the calculations are ambiguous, right? We know it's 70 years, but it's hard to calculate the 70 years. Think about this. Remember, HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants Galus to be a cathartic experience, a tshuva-filled experience. If you know exactly when Geula is going to come, right, then what do you do? You just wait. You just say you don't have to do anything. The whole point of this was, we kind of know when it's going to happen, not exactly when it's going to happen. Everybody's making mistakes about the calculations. In an effort, the ambiguity is what fuels the tshuva process. Mikot makom, kashu kraya adadi. Now I will say, interestingly enough, when you analyze all of this, why is this calculation so confusing? Because the truth is, the psukim seem to give me two different start times for the counting of the 70 years. One pasuk says, ksiv melos bavel. One pasuk says, ultimately again, one pasuk says, from melos bavel. That, we'll say now, melos bavel sounds like from when Bavel rules over the Jewish people, uksiv lacharvos Yushalayim, from the destruction of Yushalayim. So which one is it? So you both say, remember again, Belshazzar we know was wrong, right? Belshazzar the throne. So that's clear as wrong. But Melos Bavel sounds like from the time that the Babylonians ruled over the Jewish people. And then another pasuk says, Charvos Yushalayim, from the time Yushalayim was destroyed. Which one is it? Babylonian dominion or the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash? To which the Gemara says, Amarava lepekida ba'alma. Lepekida ba'alma. So if you look at Rashi, Rashi is right across. Va'amar lefi melos Bavel shivim shana efkod eschem v'kach haisa shenifkedu b'shana achas lekoresh melech paras shehi shnas ayin aleph lekibush Yaakov Kopel. Supposed to say, interesting enough, the Gemara says as follows. It's really two different dates. The Beis Hamikdash will be rebuilt 70 years after the destruction of the first Beis Hamikdash. But Pekida, HaKadosh Baruch Hu remembers us for salvation 70 years from the beginning of Babylonian dominion. So ultimately, again, from 7 years from Babylonian dominion, HaKadosh Baruch Hu remembers us. 7 years from the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash is when HaKadosh Baruch Hu allows for the commencement of the rebuilding of the second temple. Incredible. V'hainu dichsiv ko amar koresh melech paras ko mamlechos haaretz nasan li Hashem elokei hashamayim v'hu pakad alai livnos bo bayis b'Yerushalayim. And I will say, in fact, amazingly enough, Koresh himself says this. Right, Koresh says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu has appointed me to rebuild his home in Yerushalayim. Incredible. Darshav Nachabar Chisda. My dichsiv, I will say first wide line, Yud Beis Amud Aleph. My dichsiv, what's the meaning of the pasuk? Ko Amar Hashem leMashicho leKoresh asher echzakti biyamino. So we'll say, listen to this. This is fascinating. The pasuk says, let me read to you the pasuk in its entirety. The pasuk says, Ko Amar Hashem, this is Yeshaya. Ko Amar Hashem leMashicho leKoresh. Hashem said to his anointed one, to Koresh, Asher chazakti biyamino, I held on to his right hand, L'rad lefanav goyim umasni malachim afateach liftach lifnei b'lasam. I'm supposed to listen to this. Says the Gemara, why is Koresh called the anointed one of God? Rabbi say, that's like Mashiach. Why is he called Mashiach? So the Gemara says, V'chi Koresh Mashiach haya? Ela Amar Yaakov Baruch Hu Mashiach. Rather, no. Rabbi said the way to read the pasuk is as follows: the Ribono Shel Olam was speaking with Mashiach, the Mashiach, and he says, Kovel ani lecha al Koresh. I'm complaining to you about Koresh. I'm not happy with Koresh. Why not? Ani amarti hu yivne beisi v'ikhabeis galiosai v'hu amar mi bachem mikol amo vayal. Rabbi said, this is incredible. HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, I had great designs for Koresh. Great designs for Koresh. I wanted Koresh to be the one who would rebuild the Beis HaMikdash and ultimately, again, reassemble or get the Jewish people to go back to Eretz Yisrael. But that's not what Koresh did. Instead, Rabbi said, Koresh did something very interesting. He gave the Jewish people permission to go back, but he did not push them to go back. HaKadosh Baruch Hu had in mind that Koresh was going to push Klal Yisrael to go back, but instead he just gave them the license to do so. As such, Kadosh Baruch Hu complains to the Mashiach about Koresh. Pretty incredible. It's also just incredible, I will say that sometimes the Kadosh Baruch Hu has in mind that it's not Jewish people it's not Jewish leaders who encourage Jews to make Aliyah and to go back to Eretz Yisrael. But sometimes it's a pressure from the non-Jewish leaders that causes us to once again seek out our homeland. A very, very overwhelmingly profound Gemara. In any event, we'll say, you also see over here how sometimes you see, we'll say, if you're Koresh, you're thinking that you're doing the Lord's work. You're right, you're rebuilding the Beis HaMikdash. You're telling the Jews they could go back, and meanwhile, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to the Mashiach, Koresh is falling short of his agency, of his shlichus. It's very nice that he's rebuilding, and it's very nice that he is allowing. But my kavanah was, he should push. How sometimes in life, I think I'm doing my shlichus. Sometimes in life, I think I'm fulfilling my mission. But in reality, HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants more of me. And when do I know I'm fulfilling my shlichus versus when am I supposed to push myself more? The great question of life. We'll say, let's go weiter. So we're going to continue now in our mamish line-by-line study of the Megillah. So remember again, the Gemara now set the table, quite literally, for the party of Achashverosh. Because remember again, the Megillah opens with the party. Now I understand, and now I really understand what's driving this party of Achashverosh. So the truth is, from the Gemara's perspective, what's driving the party? Achashverosh's perceived dominance over the Jewish people. The 70 years have elapsed. Klal Yisrael has not been redeemed. Let's celebrate. The Jewish people are a failed experiment. That's what's driving this celebration. So the Gemara says as follows, when describing Chel Parasum Adai Partumim. Who's invited to the party? So Chel Parasum Adai means the army, right? Chayolos, the army of Parasum Adai, Hapartumim, as well as the nobles, right? So the army is invited, the nobles, Uksiv, the Malchei Madai Paras. But one second, then it also says for the kings of Madai and Paras. So what's going on over here? It says, right, which one is it? Amarava, listen to this. But I remember again, Achashverosh ruled over the combined Persian-Median Empire. Right? Remember again, there was Paras, there was Madai, and then there was Paras Madai. So when these two empires consolidated, they made a deal. What was the deal? So the Gemara says, if the king comes from one empire, iminon malchi minaychu iparchi, v'iminaychu malchi minon iparchi. Whichever empire the king comes from, the nobleman will come from the other one. That was the deal they made. That's why you find ultimately again chel paras umadai partumim lemalchei madai uparas. So there are noblemen, there are kings. So I will say, in order to kind of preserve a balance of power, they made this deal in this consolidated empire. Baharoso es osher kivod malchuso. So I will say, get ready for this. What did Achashverosh do? During this party? He showed off his wealth. Rabbi Yossi, will say, listen to how profound this is. Rabbi Yossi, Bar Chanina Melamed Shelavash Bigdei Kahuna. What did Achashverosh wear at the party? He wore the Bigdei Kahuna, right? He wore the clothing of the Kohanim. This was Osher Kivod Malchusa. Because I will say, interestingly enough, what the Gemara is darshaning over here is Osher means wealth, Kavod means honor. What are you referring to that's Osher and Kavod? It's amazing how Achashverosh, I will say, in general, by the way, isn't it fascinating? Achashverosh rules 127 provinces. The Jews are a conquered nation. And I will say, one of the things that does not change in the stage of humanity is mankind's preoccupation with the Jewish people. Right? It's not just in the UN Security Council that there is a preoccupation with Israel. And right, this is a historic thing. It's fascinating. Achashverosh is assembling everyone, the entire world. He rules over the entire world. And yet, what's the big thing he's going to do? he's going to wear the clothing of the Kohen Gadol. Right? It's just fascinating how, again, the world always has had this preoccupation with Klal Yisrael. What's his greatest sign of power? He rules over 127 countries. His greatest sign of power is he can wear the clothing of the Kohen Gadol, because deep down the world understands the power of Klal Yisrael. We may be small in number, and we may have a very small homeland, but the influence and the dominance and the power that we wield, again, on a ruchni level, in the entire world, is understood by the Umos HaOlam. Such an incredible yesod. So the Gemara says, follows, Ksiv hacha yikar tfaris gedula, so ksiv hasam lechavod l'sifaras. Interestingly enough, the pasuk says, and it was at the end of the days of the party. Shabbos say, here's what the king did. This was quite interesting. First, the king Achashverosh made a party for all of the people on the outlying areas. Afterwards, he made a second party, and the second party was just for the residents of Shushan, just for the residents of the capital city of Shushan. So, sorry? What did I say? I'm just going to go. Rav Shmuel, sorry. Rav Shmuel, so say machlokes Rav Shmuel. Chad Amar Melech Pikei Achaya. So say, interestingly enough, there's a machlokes. So again, this was the structure of Achashverosh's party. First, he went ahead and he made a party for the outlying areas, and then afterwards he made a party for the residents of Shushan. This is machlokes. Chad Amar, so the Gemara says, Chad Amar Melech Pikei Achaya, v'Chad Amar Melech Tipei Shaya. One says Achashverosh is very wise, and both say this is a machlokes that runs through the Megillah. Was Achashverosh exceedingly wise, or was he exceedingly foolish? So Man Damar Melech Pikei Achaya, the one who says he was very smart, Shapir Avid, Dikariv Rechika Bereisha, it's good to enfranchise your distant constituents first. Debnei Masya call imas debay mefaisis. You say, being king and ruling over such a sprawling empire requires you to constantly cultivate a sense of commitment and fidelity amongst your constituents. So one says Achashverosh was very smart, because what did he do? First, he makes a party for the people in the outlying lands, because those are the ones you have to worry about most. You could always cultivate a sense of connection to the people closest to you at any time. So it was a good idea to first make the party for the outlying provinces, and then afterwards for Shushan. Umandar Tipei Shaya, the one who says he was a fool, no, it's always better to make sure that the people around you pledge their allegiance to you, right? Always to make sure that they are committed and trustworthy. Why? Because should there ever be a rebellion from the outlying areas, you would be relying on the people closest to you for the first line of defense. Shabbos, I see interesting machlokes, thinking about this as well. It's actually a very profound, I think, life machlokes as well. We'll say, in the way that a person lives their life, what's the best way to go about life? Should a person be future-focused? Right? Should a person kind of be thinking long game? Like, what do I want to accomplish? What do I want to be? Rachok. Right? I'm looking in the distance, and my goal is to try to create a life plan going forward. Or and again, it's not that I ignore the things that are closer to me, but I'll get to the things that are closer to me, the low-lying fruit in life, a little bit later. Or should a person be focused on the opportunity for the low-lying fruit of growth? Focus on the here and now. What opportunities are in front of me? What can I actualize? What can I maximize? Of course, I'm going to think about what's further away in the long-term game as well, but that's not my primary focus. And I both say the truth is, it's a shaila. It's a shaila. In other words, who's right in this case, right? Rav or Shmuel. And the truth is not clear, because they're both good approaches. They're both good approaches. And in life also, right? On one hand, to be solely focused on the short game of life and not to think about the long game is probably a little bit short-sighted. To only think about the long game and not think about the short game is equally short-sighted. So life is this incredible synthesis between, on one hand, taking advantage of the low-lying fruit, the opportunities that are in front of me each and every day, the karov, but also at least giving some thought to the rachok. What's my plan? Where am I going? What am I doing? What am I trying to accomplish? Incredible. Shalom, tell me this, Rashbi. So we'll say the students ask the following question. Why is it that the Jews were punished? Right? Why were the Jews punished in that generation? So we'll say there's no question that the rise of Haman, the decrees of Haman and Achashverosh were perceived to be a punishment against Klal Yisrael. Why did the Jewish people deserve such punishment? Amr lahem, amru atem. So this is interesting. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai says, you tell me. Good question. Answer your own question. So the Gemara says, so the students answered because the Jews benefited from the feast of Achashverosh. And I will say, especially if you understand that feast as a celebration over the very demise of the Jewish people, then the fact that Jews participated in that Seudah was the greatest transgression. Was the greatest transgression. Imkain, Shebeshushan Yahargu, Shebachala Olam Kula Ayahargu. We'll say if that's the case, it was only the Jews of Shushan who participated in that party, right? The Jews of the outlying kingdom. I mean, there weren't that many Jews in the outlying kingdom, right? Jews were primarily in Bavel, right? In the immediate empire. So if that's the case, the Jews of the greater world should not have been subject to annihilation. Amrlo Amr Ata. So remember again. So we'll say just to understand the flow. They come to Rashbi. Shema Yochai. Why was there a decree upon them to be annihilated? Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai says, you tell me. They answer because the Jews participated in the Suda. Rashbi says that's fine, but if that's the case, the decree should only be upon the Jews of Shushan. Why would the decree be upon the Jews of the outlying areas of the empire as well? So they say, okay, Rabbi, you tell us. Amr lahem, bivnei shishtachavu latzelem. Rabbi will say, ultimately, again, because Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai says, because they bowed down to the idol. Rashi points out this was in the days of Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar had made an idol of himself and required a pledge of allegiance of all of his constituents, of all of those who he dominated, to bow down to the idol. The Jews bowed down to the idol of Nebuchadnezzar. Amrulo, v'chimas upanim yesh badavar. So the students say, Rebbe, if that's the case that the Jews bowed down to the idol, that the Jews went ahead and worshipped idolatry, then why were they spared? Then why were they saved? Shouldn't they be subject to annihilation? Amar lahem, heim lo asu ela lifnim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu lo asema ela lifnim. So to which Rashbi responds, the Jews didn't really worship idolatry. In other words, they did an external display of bowing, but truth is, in their heart, they never actually pledged their allegiance to idolatry. So just like they only, right, on the outside they worshipped, but on the inside they maintained their fidelity to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So we'll say, what's the entire Purim story? On the outside, it looks like there's going to be annihilation, but from the inside, which we have the advantage of seeing in the Megillah, from the inside it's clear that what? HaKadosh Baruch Hu is already orchestrating salvation. Incredible. So the Gemara says, "Hey lo asu elifnim, afakadosh baruch hu lo asem elifnim. Ba'inu d'chsev kilo ana milibo." The chatzar ginas bitan hamelach. So we'll say, where did the party take place? So this is interesting. Chatzar is courtyard, gina is garden, bitan is the palace. So which one is it? Where was the party? So Rav Shmuel chat amar haray lechatzar lechatzar, haray legina legina, haray lebitan lebitan. So let's listen to this. Machlokes Rav Shmuel. One opinion said, in fact, where you were seated with the party reflected your station in the kingdom. Some people were seated in the courtyard, some people were seated in the garden, and some people were seated in the palace. Different people. The Chadamar, Hoshivan B'chatzar, others say no. What happened was, originally the goal was outdoor party, to house the party in the Chatzar. V'lo hechzika, v'lo hechzikisan, v'lo hechziksan. And what happens? Baruch Hashem, the party grew. Too many people, Chatzar can't accommodate. So begina, put them in the gina, lo hechziksan, ad shech nisan lebitan vechziksan. So in other words, the other opinion says no, there wasn't like, what's the word, tiered seating? That's the wrong word. But you understand, there wasn't seating according to the station. They just had to keep moving locations because there wasn't an area until they finally reached the palace that was capable of accommodating all of the attendees. B'masni satana hoshivan b'chazer upasach len shnei psachim echa legina ve'echa lebitan. Other explained that he put them in the chatzar, but there are two doorways opened up, one to the garden and one to the palace from the chatzar. Chur, karpas, utcheles. So again, the Megillah, when describing the opulence of the party, says there was chur, karpas, and tcheles. What does that mean? So my chur, Rav Amar Chari Chari. Rav says Chari Chari. So we'll say, what's Chari Chari? Rashi says, Maisamachat Malachas Amatzos Haisasuyin Nekavim. This refers to a special type of embroidery. Chari Chari. There were cushions there. Ushmuel Amar Milas. Shmuel says there was cushions there made of fine wool. Milas Lavana. Hitzia Lahem. See, so I will say, so according to both of these approaches, so Chur ultimately means some type of finely embroidered pillows, mattresses, karpas. What's karpas? Am Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina, karim shel pasim. Again, pillows or cushions made of fine wool. They will say, by the way, isn't it fascinating? Isn't it fascinating that karpas in the Megillah means an expensive and fine item, right? Cushions made of fine wool. And yet what? Ultimately, again, by the Pesach Seder, right? Karpas just means your potato and salt, right? Or whatever person uses for karpas. Just the most basic things. Rabbi Nachman says something so beautiful. He says to teach us that in life, a person must always realize that from your expensive cushion to your simple potato, it's all from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. There's nothing in my life that's not from the Ribono Shel Olam, from the most expensive item I possess to the simplest possession I possess, all from the Ribono Shel Olam. Al Galile Kesef va'amudei sheish mitos zahav va'kesef. So I'll say, so literally, Al Galile Kesef, on rods of silver, va'amudei sheish, pillars of marble, mitos zahav va'kesef, beds made of gold and silver. Tanya, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Haray lekesef lekesef, Haray lezav lezav. So Rabbi Yehuda says there are different kinds of beds. There were gold beds, silver beds. Who got what? Well, it depended on your position, right? So chashuva people got gold, less chashuva people got silver. If that's the case, are you not creating animosity? In other words, I will say, the whole point over here for Achashverosh is to create a sense of achdus, right? A union. So if you're going to put some people on gold beds, some people on silver beds, doesn't that create friction, right? Look who's on the gold bed, right? Who does he think he is? He's on the gold bed. He's on the silver bed. I have no bed, right? So isn't it going to undermine what Achashverosh wants to accomplish? Ella heim shal kesef v'raglein shal zav. Rather, again, I will say what it means is the beds themselves were made of silver, and their feet, the feet of the bed, was made of gold. Bahat vashesh. What does it mean, Bahat vashesh? Amrabasi avanim shemischotetos al ba'alehen. Bahat vashesh, I will say, refers to stones, precious stones, ultimately, again, that are sought after, right? That are desired by their owners. V'cheinu omer avnei nezer misnosesos alad masal. Vidar v'sochares. What does that mean? Rav Amar dari. Rav says that the jewels were arranged in rows and rows. Shmuel Amar Even Tovi Ishbekrach Yayam, there is a certain jewel overseas, Vidara Shma. The name of the jewel is the Dara jewel. Hoshiva be'emtza suda, you place it in the middle of a room, and what happens? Ume'irlem kitzarayim, and the jewel itself gives off light like the sun in the middle of the day. The Be'er Rabbi Yishmael, right in the Be'er Yishmael, they said no. Shekara drar lechol ba'alei schora. So I'll say, what does dar mean? What does dar v'sochares? It means Achashverosh lifted all taxes from merchants, right? There was a tax-free. Merchants don't have to pay their taxes for whatever amount of time. Vashkos biklei zahav, and everybody drank in gold utensils. The kelim mikelim shonim, which we mentioned before, and unique types of utensils. Mishunim mibai. It should say not shonim, but mishunim, unique. Obviously, the Gemara says, Amarav Yatsa Baskava Amar Lahem, Rishonim Kalim Mipnei Kalim, Va'atim Shonim Bahem. The Baskal came out and said the earlier ones, i.e. under Belshazzar, they met their premature demise because they messed with the utensils, and now you are repeating this same mistake. Going back to what we started with today, I will say that the party of Achashverosh utilized the utensils of the Beis HaMikdash. So I will say, so the Gemara says, V'yein Malchus Rav, an incredible amount of wine. Amarav, this is incredible. Everybody drank wine that was older than them. So the wine steward would ask you, age please, and you would get a wine that was an older vintage than you. Vashtia kidas ein ones. So we'll say, what does that mean? Now, shtia kidas means The drinking, when according to the law, according to the rule, ein ones. No one is forced. My kidas, Amar Chaim Shlomo Meir, kidas shel Torah. Interestingly enough, the drinking was done in accordance with Torah law. What does that mean? Just like I will say, we know, we've seen this before in Masechtas Brachos, that you're always supposed to eat more than you drink during mealtime. You eat more than you drink. So to ultimately, again, by the Suda V'Achashverosh, more eating than drinking. I will say, what does this mean? That Achashverosh is conducting his Suda in accordance with normative Jewish dietary law. But say, so understand something. Achashverosh wanted the Jews to celebrate with him. Because remember, he was celebrating the demise of the Jewish people. But understand, Achashverosh himself, originally, before Haman, has no interest in annihilating the Jewish people, right? It's not good for a ruler to annihilate a pocket of your population. That wasn't his intention. His intention was to celebrate his victory over the Jewish people, and now again, Eretz Yisrael as a vassal state, the Jewish people as citizens of the Persian Median Empire. And as such, he invites them to join in you're part of the celebration. That chapter of your lives as citizens of Eretz Yisrael, as a separate autonomous people, that's over. That's over. Now you're part of us. Now you're part of us. So they're invited. Not only are they invited, but Achashverosh goes out of his way to go ahead and allow them to celebrate in accordance with Jewish law. I guarantee you, there were 50 echsherim on the meat, right? And he brought it out wrapped. You want it double wrapped, you get it double wrapped, right? We'll unwrap it in front of you. We won't uncork anything. If the wine's not mavushal, you could hold on to it, right? Everything. That's the tragedy of this. Achashverosh was inviting them to celebrate what he perceived to be their own demise. And I both said that's not even the height of the tragedy. What's the real height of the tragedy? What's the real height of the tragedy? That the Jews came. Because I both say sometimes you could be celebrating and the party is totally kosher, yet the endeavor is fundamentally treif. And I will say there are so many situations like this in life where I'm engaged in things that are kosher. What am I doing wrong? What am I doing? Well, say, no, come on, we all have private conversations like this with ourselves when we're doing something. And in my heart, I know it's not the right thing to be doing. So I ask myself, well, what's wrong with it? What's wrong with it? And very often the answer is, what's wrong with it? What's wrong with it? Nothing. Totally kosher. It's actually glot. It's totally fine. But I know it's not the right thing to do. I know it's not the right thing to do. It's not the right thing to do because it doesn't advance my life agenda. This is not good for me. I know I'm not violating any isurim. I'm not going to Gehenna for this one, right? I'm not going to, right? Nothing bad. I'm not doing anything bad. But I will say, I also know just because I'm not doing something bad doesn't mean I'm doing the right thing in life. There are so many things. Sometimes the worst things we do are not usser. The worst things we do often are the things that don't advance my life agenda. They're just not good for me. They're not proper for me. They're beneath me. They don't help me self-actualize. And that's the story of the Megillah. The Jews are attending this party. We're going to see everything is glot. Everything is glot. The wine, kosher, mavush, yashan, everything is as it should be. The only problem is you're spending your time at the wrong party. Rabbi say, how many times in life are we spending our time at the wrong party? The party's kosher. It's totally kosher. It's just not the party I should be at. So the Gemara goes weiter. The Gemara says, Ein ones, literally, Amar Rabbi Elazar, Melamid shekol echad ve'echad heshkeo yain midinaso. But say, listen to this, everybody drank the wine of the original country, right? Because sometimes people aren't used to wine from other places. Everybody got wine from the original country. Lasos kirtzon ish v'ish, again, to do in accordance with every man's will. Amar Rava, Lasos kirtzon Mordechai v'Haman. Mordechai dichsid ish Yehudi, Haman ish tsar va'oye. Rabbi say, we're going to see, by the way, Mordechai and Haman were the two people appointed as like the guys in charge of the Su'uda, right? They were in charge of the Su'udos. So Lasos kirtzon ish v'ish, Haman decided kind of what was going to be on the menu, what kind of wine for the general population, and Mordechai was in charge ultimately again of the wine and the menu for the Jewish people. I will say, you'll ask, Mordechai Tzaddik, how are you participating in this whole thing? I will say, sometimes life is about mitigating bad circumstances. The Jews are going to this party. At least if Mordechai is involved, he could ensure that That the food is, that the wine is not yayin nesach, and that at least, again, no significant isurim will be transgressed. Because sometimes people are just going to go to the wrong party. Party Beis Hamalchus in the palace. Beis Hanashim, by the way, bro, say, shouldn't Vashti have made a party in her own quarters? Beis Hanashim, right? The women had their own area. So why would Vashti be making a party in the palace? Hazrat say, again, it wouldn't be normal for the women to be celebrating in the same place as the men. Which the Amarava Shnehim L'Dvar Aver Niskavnu. Both Achashverosh as well as Vashti were immoral people. And they both had in mind for the men to celebrate together, to party together, because they both had in mind for immorality. So the Gemara says, Harun da'armi inshi, ihu bekari v'isaseh bebotzini. They both say, this is the famous adage, the man has large gourds and the woman has small gourds. Another one of these expressions that works much better in the Aramaic, the idea, right, the man might have larger gourds, the woman might have smaller gourds, but everybody's interested in gourds, right? So the idea is everybody in this story is immoral. Achashverosh is immoral, Vashti is immoral, which I will say, there's so much to say about each of these things as well. But the idea being over here, don't think for a moment there are intentions by any of these parties. Vashti purposely has her women's party at the same place as the men's party. Everybody having in mind for immorality. But I will say it's great. It was on the seventh day of the party. And the king was, the king's heart was glad with wine, which means what? He was drummer. Ad hashtu latav libe bechamra. I don't understand. Achashverosh wasn't drunk until now. It took to the seventh day of the party for him to get drunk. The seventh day of the party was Shabbos. And what happened? Sheisrael ochlin b'shosin maschil machos. So we'll say, when Jews eat and drink on Shabbos, right? So what do we start with? Kiddush. Shalom Aleichem Malachi Hasharis. How does a Jew begin a Seudah? A Jew begins with the Malachi Hasharis. Thank you for joining me. A Jew begins a Seudah with Kiddush. That's how we start material and physical endeavors with a sprinkling of spirituality or a healthy dose of spirituality. That's how we start. Aval Ovdei Kochavim. But again, the Gentile nations, she'ochlin v'shosin, ein maschilin ela b'divrei tefilos. They only begin, again, I will say, divrei tefilos means headed things, unimportant things, and it's actually more severe. I will say that's how it happened in the Seudah of Achashverosh. How did the Seudah of Achashverosh, what was the conversation at the Seudah of Achashverosh? Halalu omrim medios nos. One group said the women Madai for women. Va'alalu omrim parasios nos. Other groups said, no, the Persian women are the most beautiful women. Achashverosh says, you're all wrong. Kli shani mishtamish bo, the utensil that I use. Eino lo Madai v'lo Parsi. She's not from Madai. She's not Persian. Ella kasdi. Right? So we'll say, first of all, you see just the vulgarity of this, right? For a man to talk about his wife, the utensil that I use. You have to understand something, by the way. We're not getting into this now just because of time. To really understand the Megillah, I would urge you to learn the Megillah with the parish of Malbim. The Malbim highlights over here that what's at the cornerstone of the story of the Megillah is a commoner who becomes king and always feels secure on the throne. Right? Everyone agrees Achashverosh was not royalty. He was not royalty. There's a machlokes. When we saw yesterday's daf, how did he get it? Right? Was he just exceptionally skilled? But he was not monarchy. Because he was not royal blood, Achashverosh always exhibits a profound sense of insincerity. Malbim is incredible. The Malbim says, Achashverosh goes in and moves the capital city to Shushan. The capital city was never in Shushan. He made Shushan the capital city because he wanted to on the monarchy. The Malbim explains, why does he do this whole lavish party? So the Malbim explains so beautifully because, interestingly enough, Parasumadai, the Persian Median Empire, was what we call today contemporarily a constitutional monarchy. Achashverosh wanted to change that from a constitutional monarchy, dictatorial monarchy. And one of the ways he does that is he privatizes the treasury. How does he show that he privatizes the treasury? He shows off the money as his own. One of the other ways that he solidifies his claim to the throne is he demeans, because Vashti is royalty, right? Vashti is a granddaughter of Nebuchadnezzar. She is a daughter of Belshazzar. She is real monarchy. Achashverosh does not miss an opportunity to demean his wife as a way of up his own self-esteem. A dynamic that unfortunately happens in too many marriages, but again happens over here because he feels this is the way to solidify his claim to the throne. So he says, you guys are all wrong. It's not the Persian women, it's not the Median women. It's my wife. She's not Persian. She's not Median. She is the most beautiful. So listen to this. Amr lo. So the Amr lo. I'm sorry. Any lamada parsi elakasti. Ritzonchem l'rasan. Do you want to see her? And of course, the men say, sure. Amr lo in. Obavacha teharuma. As long as she comes out unclothed. This is the queen. This is the queen. This is the queen, and this is how the king is talking about the queen, and this is the dialogue. Rabbi said, think about this. What do we do on a Shabbos when we drink? What do we do on a Yom Tov when we sing Zmiris? We say Divrei Torah, and the Umal Sa'olam, what do they do when they drink? They speak about women, and they demean. And again, even the king is talking about his own wife like this. So the Gemara says, Shebemida sha'ada moded ba, modedin lo. Now I will say, Vashti was getting midah keneged midah. The way in which you conduct yourself is the way in which you are treated. How so Malamed? Vashti used to mistreat the Jewish girls. And what would she do? She would make them unclothed. We'll say it's bizarre. It's like bizarre. She would make them work unclothed on Shabbos. So she would demean them dafka on Shabbos. Therefore, again, Hainu dichsiv achar hadvar kisho chamas hamelach Achashverosh zachar es Vashti ve'is asher asasa ve'is asher nigzar aleha kishem asasa, just like Vashti conducted herself, kach nigzar. So we'll say, listen to the midah kineged midah. Vashti demeaned the Jewish women by making them work unclothed on Shabbos, called to appear unclothed before Achashverosh and his men's party on Shabbos. Vatimain hamalka Vashti. Vashti refused to appear. So Achashverosh sends ultimately a message to Vashti, come and appear before the men's party unclothed. Vashti refuses. I just also point out, the Bible points something amazing. Every time Vashti is talking, the Megillah calls her Hamalka Vashti. Every time Achashverosh refers to Vashti, it's always Vashti Hamalka. And the Bible says it's by design. Achashverosh says, you're the queen because of me. You're not a queen. You're a queen because you're married to the king. And Vashti says, oh no, my dear husband. You are the king because you're married to me. I am royalty. So she always refers to herself as Hamalka Vashti. He refers to her as Vashti Hamalka. So here you see, Vatima'ein Hamalka Vashti. Who are you? I'm not showing up. Michti, but I don't understand. We just said that great Aramaic adage. He has large gourds. She has small gourds, right? So they're all immoral. So what's going on over here? Why isn't she showing up? So the Gemara says, "My tamalo asai, Rabbi Yossi barchani lemelame sheparcha bot saras." Because Rabbi says she saras b'mas nisatana ba Gabriel v'asal azanav. Otherwise, it's thought that Malach Gabriel came and made her a tail. Others Rabbi say, whatever it is, some type of skin issue developed for her, either a tail or tsaras. The point is, her beauty was marred, and therefore she did not come. So to be clear, her refusal to come was not that suddenly she developed, Vashti became pious, and suddenly she decided to want to be immoral. She felt embarrassed to come. Vayiktav HaMelech Ma'od. The king got very angry. So Amai Dalka Bekulehai. So ultimately, again, why did he get so angry? So I will say, listen to this. Amar Rava, so here's what's amazing. Let's read it, then we'll see. Amar Rava, Shalchalei. So here's the message that Vashti sent back. Bar Ahuraire Da'aba. You stable boy of my father. This is the exchange between husband and wife, right? You think you have shalom bayis problems, right? So I'll say, so now listen to this, right? This is the exchange. She calls him a stable boy of her father. Now, both say, we're going to see there is a narrative like this, that Achashverosh rose through the ranks, that he was a stable boy. So she calls him a stable boy. Look what she says to him. Abba lakaba alfa chamra. Shasi v'lo Ravi. My father could drink the amount of 1,000 men, and he would not go ahead and get drunk. V'ahu gavra, and you ishtati bechamra. You get drunk right away. So we'll say she insults him in two ways. Number one, she calls him a stable boy. Number two, you can't hold your liquor. I don't know which one is worse, right? But they're both right. But they're both an affront to Achashverosh's masculinity. Miyad. Immediately Achashverosh gets angry. I will say, by the way, what's incredible about this? What's incredible about this exchange? Right? Vashti doesn't want to come. What should be the message that she sends back? What should be the message? You don't want me to show up, right? I've got a tail, a little problem, right? I've got a tail, right? Or I have tzaras. She doesn't respond that way. Right? She doesn't respond that way. Instead, she responds in anger. You stable boy who can't hold your liquor. Why doesn't she just tell him straight out why she can't come? I will say, isn't this a dynamic so many times in relationships that we don't really say what we mean, right? We don't really say what we mean, right? Rather, we say something else. And if we just said what we meant, if we just said what the real issue was, if we just spoke about the real things instead of dancing around them, how much better our life relationships would be. Why doesn't Vashti just say she has saras? I don't know. Maybe she's embarrassed. Right? How exactly do you break it to your husband, I have a tail? Right? How do you frame that? Maybe she's embarrassed. She took much pride in her personal beauty. Now her own ego is suffering. So we'll say, what often happens when when it comes to ego and somebody bruised your ego, most times people respond with vitriol. That's what happens. You hurt my ego? I'm going to give it right back to you. Her ego is hurt now. I'll say, but such a yesod, so many times in life in our relationships, we don't say the things that are really bothering us. We don't have the conversations that really need to be had. Instead, we begin talking about a whole host of other things. And then what ends up happening is a brand new dynamic is introduced that often has terribly detrimental effects. Such a relationship yesod. So the king is angry. The king said to his advisors, what should I do? So man chachamim, we'll say this is incredible. Who are the chachamim we consulted? Rabbanan. We'll say his inner circle, apparently again of wise men, were the Jews of the Sanhedrin. Yodea itim sheyodin la'aber shana v'lakba chadashim. They knew how to go and intercalate the months and the years. So we'll say, isn't this incredible? His go-to council cabinet were the members of the Sanhedrin. Amr lahem dainu ali. And he says to the members of the Sanhedrin, judge Vashti for me. So these were smart men. Amru heichinav. They said, no way. We're not going to do this. Heichinav, what should we do? Neimolei katle. If we tell Achashverosh she should kill Vashti, lemachra pasuk lechamra. Tomorrow the effects of the wine are going to wear off. Uboy leminan. And he's going to hold us accountable for ordering her death. Neimolei shafka. If we tell him to do nothing about Vashti, kamazalzal b'malchusa. Look, at the end of the day, she publicly embarrassed the king. There's got to be some effect. So therefore, again, the Chachamim feel they're in this terrible bind. Amrulo says, Achashverosh, miyom shechara beis hamikdash v'galinu mi'artzenu, nitla eitzah mimenu ve'ein anu yadun ladun dinei nefashis. So he said, Achashverosh, the truth is, from the time that we were exiled from the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, by the way, by your predecessor, right? We no longer have the ability to adjudicate capital cases, which I will say, by the way, was actually true, right? Remember again, we saw this Gemara, this is by Second Temple era, Mishrabu Harachtsonin, when murder became prevalent, they left Lishkas Agazes. So said to Achashverosh, we cannot adjudicate this case for you. Zil Lagabe Ammon Umoav, go to the wise men of Ammon and Moab, Diyasi b'duchtayu, who are situated in their country, kechamra diyasiv al durdaye, like wine that sits on its sediment. V'taima amrulei, and ultimately again they'll tell you good logic. Or they said good to Achashverosh, shanan ma binu arav, v'shogei to el shemar v'lohorik mikli al kli, u'bagola lohalach alkin amad tama bo v'reichalo namad baya. So it's actually incredible. So the Chachamim said, the Jewish Chacham said to Achashverosh, go to the people of Ammon and Moab, for the truth is, they've never experienced galus. They're sitting in their land, in their homeland, like wine that sits on its sediment and is able to soak up its flavor. And because of that, they're able to look at things in a more critical fashion. We'll say, which tells you something amazing. In order to have good judgment, what do you need? What do you need? Yishuv Hadas. A person needs a certain level of inner tranquility and inner peace in order to be able to see things for what they are. This is why Abba said we know this, that when a person makes decisions, when they're not in a good emotional state, when I make decisions, right, when I feel like I'm not in a good place, those are the worst time to make decisions. Worst time to make decisions. Because at the end, remember at the beginning of the pandemic, there were all of us, people were saying, really, you shouldn't make decisions during the pandemic. This was a big thing. They were telling couples who were contemplating divorce or different things, don't make rash decisions. That's when we thought the pandemic was going to be like 3 months. People said, just wait a little bit, right? So I'll say, but there's an incredible yesod. Don't make dramatic decisions when things don't, there's bahala, personal upheaval, global upheaval. So again, the Jews say to Achashverosh, go ahead and speak to Ammon and Moab. They have clarity because they have serenity. I will say, but also an incredible yesod that so often when we are in a state of personal turbulence, don't make big decisions. Because ultimately, you may not be seeing things clearly, you may not see life for what it is, and you may not be seeing yourself for who you are. Va'akarav elav miyad, va'akarav elav karshona sheisra masa tarshish. Amr Levi, Pasuk is incredible. So then the Pasuk says, and who were the close advisors to Achashverosh? Karshona sheisra masa tarshish. Amr Levi, kal Pasuk zeh al shum karbanos ne'emar. Pasuk is incredible. All of these psukim actually correspond to karbanos. So the Gemara says, what does this mean? What the Gemara says? Karshana Amr Malach Yasharis. The HaKadosh Baruch Hu Rebbeinu Shalom Klum Hikrivu Lefanecha Karim B'nei Shana Kederach Shekrivu Yisrael Lefanecha. So we'll say, so remember again, this episode of Achashverosh trying to figure out what to do with Vashti, remember again, this is the beginning of the story of salvation. Right? How so? Because remember again, when Achashverosh kills Vashti, he clears the way for who? For Esther Hamalka. So what the Gemara says is as follows, really something absolutely amazing. So the Gemara says, so the Gemara darshans, this pasuk is referring to karbanos. What's happening over here is the Malachim begin to advocate for Klal Yisrael, that Klal Yisrael should be spared. Should be right? Nothing's even happened yet. But the Malachim know what's coming down the pike. Klal Yisrael should be spared in the merit of the karbanos. Then I both say, what's the problem of the Malachim advocating for us in the power of karbanos? What's the problem with that? There are no karbanos. The base English was destroyed. I both say it comes back to something we spoke about a few weeks ago. Even when there are no actual karbanos that are being offered, the karbanos that we say each and every day, Parashas Akiyar, Parashas Hatamid, Parashas Akitores, Ezehu Mekoman, the karbanos that we say save the day. They save the day for Klal Yisrael. So this is what the Malachim are saying. Karshana, Amr Malachim, Hashem HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Ribon Shem Klum Mikru Lefanecha, Karim B'nei Shana, Kederach Shekrivu Yisrael Lefanecha. The nations of the world, do they go ahead and offer up before you sheep that are a year old, like Klal Yisrael did? Klum Mikru Lefanecha Shtei Torin, right? Ultimately against Shesar. Did the nations of the world ever offer up to you the Shtei Torim, the 2 pigeons like Klal Yisrael does? Admasa, Klum Yesh Banu Lefanecha Mizbeach Adama. Nations of the world ever build an earthen Mizbeach before you? Tarshish, Klum Shimshu Lefanecha B'Big Day Kahuna. Nations of the world ever serve before in Big Day Kahuna? Tichsibu Tarshish B'Sham V'Yishbe Meres Klum Meres Klum Mirsu Badam. Meres, did they ever stir the blood in front of you? Mersina Klum Mirsu B'Menachos. Did they ever stir the mincha in front of you? Memuchan Did they ever go ahead and prepare a shulchan before you? So we'll say, isn't this incredible? So the Gemara understands that Karshana, Shesar, Admasa, Tarshish all refer to different aspects of sacrificial service. That it is here in this pivotal moment, the Malachim say to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, don't forget about the Jews. Because the Jews serve you like no one else serves you. They take care of you like no one else, or not take care of you. They exhibit a commitment to you through karbanos like no one else does. And each of these words, Karshana, Sheser, Admasa, Tarshish, refer again to different types of karbanos, refer ultimately to the stirring of the blood, stirring of the mincha, refer to the mizbeach, ha'adama, the earthen mizbeach, and refer to the Big Day Kunat. So we'll stop over here for today. We'll pick up in Yahrzeit Hashem with tomorrow by Yomer Memuchan. We'll say incredible, going line by line in the Gemara. Incredible and overwhelming Gemara. Shkach, everyone.